fit for me was the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, which is the first public state university to offer a conservatory education, meaning I could go in and I could get a degree in stage management and focus all of my time on this one thing that I loved so, so much. And we did have liberal art classes, for math and science and, and English and literature. And we did have those classes, but the main focus was, you could get a degree in ballet, you could get a degree in filmmaking, in composition, in the trumpet, literally anything in the performing arts, you could get a degree in. And I thought that was so, so neat. So I got a Bachelor's of Fine Arts in Stage Management. And we really got a foundation of theater. We learned more about collaboration and communication and leadership and conflict resolution and, all of these transferable skills, right, which you need in theater, but I'm sure all of you can resonate. You need conflict resolution and communication in every part of your life. So I'm very thankful to have been able to take those classes at university. And they taught us more about what a stage manager is. You're the right hand to the director. You make sure you think ahead so that everything is in the right place at the right time. If you're there in rehearsal and the actor, they're staging a scene that is at the dinner table, do you have 4 plates? The forks are set in the exact right place. The soup bowl is exactly here. The windowsill is set like this. So really thinking about logistically, do you have the things you need to make the rehearsal happen? But also you have to be a personable human being to connect and to be able to collaborate with all these people, which I love so much. I graduated from school in 2017, and I immediately moved to New York. And I started working as a production assistant on a handful of nonprofit off-Broadway theater companies. The Atlantic Theater Company and the Public Theater, if any of you are familiar. It was so neat being able to be immersed in companies that already have their structure in place, and they have their staff, and they have everything that they need to put on these performances. And so really working on the stage management team at these companies were so crucial, because after a few years, after networking, I started connecting with folks who worked on Broadway. And that's where I really found my passion and started getting into my groove. I worked on 3 Broadway shows at this point, which I'm very thankful for: the Cher Show, Tootsie, and Moulin Rouge. And from taking what I learned from my childhood and through my university, and now actually putting it in the professional setting and working with such talented artists and performers has really been huge and an incredible experience. And the Broadway world is really where I found my passion of collaboration and to keep going and to work with these wonderful artists. So after a few years of being here in the city, this past November, I finally joined the union, Actors Equity Association, which is the union that protects actors and stage managers. And I found that being a union member has really helped me continue to network and have some really wonderful job opportunities. I was an assistant stage manager for a production with Audible Theater, which Audible, as you know, they have their online audiobooks, but they've also now started to record live productions and stream them on their website. So that was a really cool experience to do, yes, a live show, but also have it recorded for audio. That was a really good experience. And then in January, I was an assistant stage manager for a brand new play that was going to open off Broadway. 6 actors, relatively small compared to Moulin Rouge or to the Cher Show. But I was able to make my mark on that production. And we rehearsed for 4 or 5 weeks. We were in the tech process, which is being in the theater and putting the lights and the costumes and the scenery and putting that all together with the actors. we worked so many hours, and we started getting into preview performances. We weren't officially open, but we had audience at night and rehearsing during the day, long hours. And March 12th happened, and we got a phone call saying, we're not coming into work today, and we don't know when we'll be back. So feel free to come in and grab your things from the theater. Otherwise, we'll see you maybe in a month from now. He said, oh, okay, cool, great. Coronavirus is a horrible thing, coronavirus, but we'll be back, for sure. There's no way that theater can be shut down for so long. Fast forward to August 26th, theater is still shut down. So how do we navigate this, right? How is the theater community still living? A huge thing that's really helping artists right now is, unemployment is so huge in just the livelihood of the everyday. It's why in the theater community, there's a lot of discussion of, how do we keep unemployment going? How do we keep these funds coming? So in my circle of people, it's a huge, huge discussion. Plenty of people have left New York, some for good, some only temporarily, spending time in, more affordable places. A lot of my friends have, gone back home to stay with their parents. My mom's on here. I'll be with her next week. So, and artists have so many transferable skills. I was talking about communication and collaboration. Artists just fundamentally have those skills to work with others, to collaborate. And so those transferable skills are huge, and looking for jobs in other marketplaces is actually great. A fun anecdote is I was grocery shopping the other day, and one of an actor that I worked with 3 years ago, maybe, we were doing a small a workshop of a new show, and I saw him. He was out in the street, and he was pitching recycling, some great cause, recycling or something, on the street outside the grocery store. And I thought, wow, I'm so glad he was able to find something in a time like this. And he is an actor, and he was able to talk to people, and he was able, to put on a show, if you will, and use those skills. So that was really great. I know there's a lot of online Zoom, events. There are some, I know, on Broadway.com, they did, a one-person play a few months ago at this point. But there's, and I'm sure some of you have seen, there's an online presence. Hamilton came out on Disney Plus, which is huge and a great way to stay involved. And also, this is an insider tidbit. There was an article that I read out there that said Diana, which is a new musical, they were in rehearsal but did not open yet on Broadway. The producers have decided to bring people back from quarantine, and I'm not really sure how they're doing this. I don't know the details, but they're bringing people back from quarantine, and they'll rehearse for, let's say, a week or two, and they're going to film it, and they're going to record it to be streamed on Netflix, which is really fascinating. This is going to be the first major Broadway musical that decides to stream their show before they even open on Broadway, which is fascinating. And then on the other hand, and on the other side, you have shows that have totally canceled. Broadway shows, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and Hangmen, which, the producers have said, what? They were brand new plays, and they said, that's it, we're canceled, we're done, we're closed. Shows like Frozen and Beetlejuice, which have already been on Broadway for quite some time, they've also canceled. So we see, it's so hard, and now all those people are really out of work. Now they have to really start looking for all
right, now they've lost the sound.
Can you still hear me?
I had a major outage yesterday and the day before I saw.
Can you guys hear me? Are you still on?
If you could talk louder, it would be helpful.
Talk louder? Okay, no problem.
We can hear you. I think there are a couple people who just tried to get on, and I want to remind everybody that if you just tried to get on, you need to make sure that you're on mute. Actually, Noam, we have the most people we've had in a month on this Zoom today. So I know
No
that
pressure.
people in the theater like to know what the house is. So we've got a big house. But I do want to remind you, Helen, especially you, make sure you're on mute.
You can mute everybody.
I know. I want them to be able to.
What I was talking about, shows that have closed. So that it's terribly tragic. There's also, on the other hand of that, there's about 14 shows that were going to open this past season that had to postpone. And so most of them have made statements that they're hoping to come back. Some of them have tried to set dates to their return next year. If you ask me, we'll be waiting for a vaccine because, how from an audience perspective, how many of you would want to come to New York and, put yourself in a theater with 1,500 people and, in those tiny restrooms? I mean, it's going to be a mess. And from the front, but also from backstage, you have, 30 actors and, 30 crew members and the musicians in an orchestra pit smaller than a New York apartment. So if you ask me, we're waiting for a vaccine to come before anything opens back up. But to boost morale, I think what's great is the American Theater Wing, along with the Broadway League, who produced the Tony Awards every year. You'll remember that they canceled the Tony Awards for this past summer, but recently they put out a press release saying that this fall they'll do a live stream, somehow a virtual online Tony Awards. I don't know the details of that, but I think that's wonderful. However, Sandy, you mentioned earlier West Side Story. Although West Side Story did open during this season, they opened a few months before coronavirus hit. West Side Story and another musical called Girl from the North Country, which both opened, unfortunately will not have not made the eligibility cutoff date for the Tony Awards. So they did open, but they'll be noticed for the next year, whenever the next season happens to be. But until then, the theater community, is staying positive and trying to stay uplifting. A friend of mine, with a great visualization, she called this the Great Pause, which I think is beautiful. It's not the end. It's, there's no nervousness. It's just a pause for now, and we'll be back. But we're really using this time. The entire theater community is really using this time to learn and to educate and to reflect. Specifically with Black Lives Matter, really learning about where we have been and where we need to go. So there's been a lot of reflection there and restructuring and making the theater industry a better place to work and to be. But in terms of coming back, in my opinion, we'll be seeing the regional theaters coming back, Arena Stage. Will be coming back with New York, in my opinion, and that's because places like Arena Stage and other regional theaters, they have the space, right? Compared to New York, you're cramped in New York, whereas out in the regions you have more space, maybe outdoor theaters. There were two theater companies in the Berkshires in Massachusetts that were able to safely socially distance and have outdoor performances, and so they proved that it's totally possible, that it's doable. And with a group of subscribers and a solid base of patrons, I think we'll see regional theaters coming back before we see New York. So that's kind of who I am, where I'm coming from, and kind of where I think where we're going. Yeah, if you have any questions, I would love to field anything that you have.
Okay, everybody, so now is the time you can unmute and ask your questions, and I'll lead off with one question or a comment, Noam. We have a friend of War Kodesh, Stan Levin. He is a theater arts, he's a rabbi also, but he's a theater arts person. He also is a director and a writer, and he works out in Rockville at a place called Best Medicine Comedy Company. And right now, if you go to to Stan's Facebook page, or if you go online, you can find a little play, one act, two actors who are doing a little play he wrote. It's very funny. It's very COVID appropriate. And so given that background, are people doing these more creative things to keep their hand in their artistic mode? I know you mentioned the fellow on the street, but what are actors and others doing to stay creative in their community?
You know, like you said, Sandy, having the ability to stay creative and stay involved is huge, especially in a time like this where we're so isolated. To be able to connect through Zoom or through online live stream is huge. So I'm thankful that people have been able to find that outlet through an online medium. I have a few friends who have started, not necessarily a business, but have started, you know, their own group of, you know, very quickly writing a 10-minute play, a 10-minute scene, and getting two actors to come on and perform it. And then there would be a talk back, a discussion afterwards with, you know, whomever tuned in. And I think that that's a great way to continue to stay connected. There's also, you know, behind the scenes, without an audience present, there's, I know a handful of workshops of, you know, of plays and musicals in development that are doing these online Zoom rehearsals. And one of my friends is stage managing it. And I was asking, you know, how do you sing on Zoom? Because, you know, as you know, there's a lag, there's a difference here. And, you know, I've looked over the shoulder with my mom for, you know, for Minions I've attended. And, you know, there's always that lag of, you know, can you say things at the same time? And there's the internet, you know, latency. And so I asked, how do you sing together? And she said it's a lot of recording yourself and sending it in to, you know, the music director, who then, you know, gives you notes or somehow combines and makes it all happen. You know, so there's any way to stay creative is huge and important.
Anyone else have questions? Okay, well, this gives me a chance to ask another follow-up question because I have hundreds of them. So, Noam, you have your ear to the pace in New York. What's in the works? What kinds of things are out there we might not even know about yet that are being worked on or developed or written or revived? Because we know the theater loves to revive its hits. So what's out there?
Right. As you all know, a big show that's going to be coming out, I guess, next year now is The Music Man, which I have a friend who was working on it, and he was saying that it's going to be huge and fantastic and wonderful. You know, unlike the previous the revival of Oklahoma, which opened, was it last year? I guess it was last year. You know, that kind of was a new take on what Oklahoma used to be. But from what I understand, The Music Man will be the Music Man that we know and love, you know, closer to the original. So we'll see that. There's, what's actually really cool, and this is a trick that I've kind of kept up with, is before shows come to New York, to Broadway, they do out-of-town tryouts. For example, Dear Evan Hansen, which is a huge, you know, blockbuster hit on Broadway, it took some time at Arena Stage, you know, and it developed there, and it kind of, you know, it tested out what the show might be to move to Broadway. There's a newer show that did an out-of-town tryout in Atlanta. Is called Becoming Nancy, which I had the opportunity to work on in the early phases. A handful of years ago. Actually, my friend that I saw on the street, that's the show he was a part of. And so, you know, the development process is you're there and you do about a week of reading through the script and learning the songs and kind of seeing what works, what doesn't. And then you do a longer process, about maybe a month, and you invite investors at the end. And then once you go through that, then you start doing an out-of-town tryout. So Becoming Nancy is a new musical that's going to be coming out. They haven't said, obviously, when they're doing Broadway, but they do they did that out-of-town tryout. So, you know, for me to follow what's happening, what's coming, what's going, I look at what's happening out in the regional theaters, what's being produced elsewhere that might have financial backing that could come to Broadway. So, I mean, that's kind of how I track it. I wish I had some insider knowledge of what we could see, but specifically with, you know, coronavirus, who is to say?
So I have one other follow-up.
Band-Aid. Oh,
Oh,
sorry. I was
Go ahead,
going to ask a
Rita.
question.
Go
It's
ahead.
okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So I actually have tickets to the Music Man, and postponed them as long as I possibly could, hoping that we will be able to go. I think I have October of 2021, even though I was given June 2021 as a possibility. So my question to you, Noam, is a question related to that, but also related to other shows in general. How is there some trick in figuring out when the leads will actually be in the show and when it won't be an understudy?
Yeah, that's a great question. The short answer is no. The longer answer is, you know, on a long-running Broadway musical, you know, actors put in either in their contract to say, I'm going to be out on this day and this day. Actors can put in for vacation time. They can put in for time off, right? It's a job just like any other job. It's, you know, it's a passion, it's a hobby, but it's a career, it's a job. So, you know, employers allow time off, which is also huge for the, you know, the mental capacity to stay in it. So is there a way to know? There is not. You might be able to call on the day, call the box office and say, you know, is Hugh Jackman in today's performance? They might know, they might not know. Yeah, that's
Thank you.
the answer. Yeah. I saw Brenda was raising her hand. Oh, you're
Brenda,
muted.
you have
though,
to take
Brenda.
yourself off mute.
Okay. Noam, tell me a little bit about famous people that you've met. I mean, I know that you've met quite a few, but tell me let us know. It's so interesting.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I did a show at the Kennedy Center last year. We did The Music Man, actually, not the same Music Man that's coming to Broadway, but it was a different version at the Kennedy Center. And in that cast was Norm Lewis, who's you know, a Broadway name, and Jessie Mueller, who originated Beautiful, the Carole King musical, and she also was in Carousel recently. But the big name was Rosie O'Donnell, was on that show. And a fun, Rosie is so fun to work with. You know, she's there just like anyone else. She's there to do the job. You know, she's there to do the work. And she's really funny. She's really funny backstage. A fun story. So when I was, you know, I was a stage manager. I was backstage with her, and you know, for those of you who know Music Man, we were doing, you know, a porch scene when it's, you know, Mama and Marion on the porch, and you know, they're chatting and they're singing. And for her entrance, right, one performance, Rosie said, I don't know when to go on. I don't remember to go on. I said, no problem, Rosie. I got you, no problem. She said, okay, just like tap me on the shoulder when I should go on. I said, okay, no problem. So the show happened. I tapped her. She went on stage. Great scene, beautiful job. Came off stage. She said, next time, can you poke me? Okay, Rosie, sure, I'll poke you, no problem. So, you know, so now she's, you know, the next show, she's backstage. I poke her. She goes on, comes back. She said, harder next time. And so I swear, I thought I was gonna give her a bruise. I mean, I was really like jabbing at her to get on stage. Anyway, so Rosie was fantastic. I worked with, when I was on Tootsie, I worked with Santino Fontana. I don't know, these are, you know, rather Broadway names, maybe not so, you know, worldwide celebrity, but who have I worked with that's been really exciting?
Share.
Cher. Oh my goodness. Yes, I worked on the Cher show. Thank you. Yes.
You're
Good.
welcome.
So Cher was involved with that production. She was one of the lead producers, of course. And she wasn't as involved or present in the rehearsal process, but there was we were in the theater and this was a preview show. So we were rehearsing for 5 hours in the afternoon, changing a whole bunch of stuff. And then we had a performance that night. And so, it's very stressful, lots of things going on. And to add to the chaos, who's at the stage door? None other than Cher, the queen herself. So, we bring her backstage. She sits out into the house and she's in the back with, all of her people in sunglasses and very in the distance. We don't talk to Cher. Cher, give her the space, fine. And then after the rehearsal, she comes back. I'm standing right there, at the pass door between the auditorium and the backstage space. And she comes back with nobody. None of her people were with her. She walks backstage and she looks me dead in the eyes. She says, the lead of our show, her name was Stephanie. Stephanie J. Block was the lead of the show. And Cher looks at me, she says, "Where's Stephanie's dressing room?" I said, "Right this way, ma'am." And I took her to the dressing room and that was it. And that was my only discussion with Cher. But she is as present and fierce as she seems, online or in her concerts. So that was a really cool experience.
Joel.
Two things. One, it would have been more amazing if at the stage door, Sonny would have been there with Cher.
Yeah,
But
yes, that would have been something.
You mentioned show coming to Broadway called Diana. Is that about Diana Ross?
It's about Princess Diana.
Oh, Princess.
Yeah, and it'll be the first. We see a lot of musicals about biographies about people, about people have made huge impacts, and so I'm excited for this one actually. I don't really know. I don't know anyone who's involved with that show specifically, but I'm very interested to see, how do they bring this, this person into our lives. I'm really excited to see what that is. So we'll see it together. It's going to be like I said, it'll be online through Netflix. I don't know what their timeline looks like, but I assume perhaps this fall at some point we'll be able to see that show together.
I have another question. How many shows do you see? How much theater do you particularly go and see?
After spending so much time in the theater, working in the theater, being around theater people, there's only so much more I can take after that. Do you know what I mean? I do think it's important though. I mean, number one, just to know what's going on. It's great to still see work and to talk to people who are working on these shows. Still very important. After a long day, when I'm really in a rehearsal process, I'm really sitting there for hours and hours and hours on end. I just go home, I eat my dinner and I go to sleep and that's it. I don't think about it anymore. But, we are gig to gig, right? In the theater industry, you do one show, you go to the next. And if you have time between, about a week after, of not doing anything, I start getting that bug again. That's when the passion really comes back. And I think, wow, I really miss it. So I do see theater when I can. And what's great is having friends in the industry. People they get comp tickets for opening night. And so they'll say, Noam, do you want to come to opening night with me? And I say, oh yeah, sure. So there is some of that of being able to go see shows of my friends that are happening. And what's neat, Broadway shows I don't see as much because those nobody gives a free ticket away for Broadway, right? Broadway is so commercialized that you pay to go see Broadway. That's fine. But the downtown theater, the off-Broadway, the more downtown grunge, if you will, in the smaller settings that have only 50 people in the room are sometimes even more powerful and insightful than the big flashy musical you'll see on Broadway. So that's also kind of what I love. In New York, there's such a range of work that's happening, from the flashy, glitzy bells and whistles of the theater district, everything to middle of nowhere Brooklyn or the downtown Manhattan. I mean, there's so much different kinds of theater to see. So it's really cool.
Are there natural conflicts between the various roles in the theater, the actors, the directors, the stage managers? I know you said that, you know, everybody's working to get the show on, but are there conflicts?
I would imagine similar to any industry, right? Anyone that happens to have an ego, who thinks that they're better than whomever, there'll be natural conflicts there. What I love about being a people person is to be able to get into someone's head and understand where they're coming from through empathy, right? And understanding where they are, and being able to quickly resolve any conflicts that come up. I will say though, for the most part, I honestly can't remember huge arguments or, you know, disputes between people at work. You know, and if there are, we got to remember that we're here to do the work. We're here, it's a job. So if there are egos that come up, which sure they do, as they do with any industry, you know, if they're a star, okay, you work with them, and you know, you do what you can to get through. But you know, conflicts are a part of the job. I don't necessarily know if there's any more conflict in theater than there would be at, you know, in any industry.
I have a question. Could you recommend any theater companies here that we should look into more seriously? I remember seeing something called Cinetic Theater rather, which was a company that was at the Kennedy Center for a while, and now there's someplace in Virginia. But while we're here and want to see theater, where should we look?
That's a great question. Truth be told, I'm not all too well versed in the DC theater scene as much, but I do know that there's some great work. I know a lot of the regional theater, the nonprofit organizations, they are still trying to put work out. I know I saw a few videos from Roundhouse, you know, which you know, I think they put out some work online there. I know there's a company in Baltimore called, it's either Everyman Theater or, you know, Baltimore City Theater Group or something, I don't know. But they do, you know, they're doing a lot of good work right now, putting things out whenever they can. Yeah, it's such a hard, especially in a time like this, you know, where we can't all be together. You know, theater is such, I mean, going back to the Greeks, you know, theater is such a communal in-person experience. I'm thankful that there's this technology to have online, you know, to still stay connected. So I'm sure there's stuff out there, and I apologize, I don't know the DC or the Maryland theater scene so well. But, you know, even tuning in virtually, the Public Theater in New York, they are doing a lot of online work. You can go to their website and they have, you know, a lot of things that are going on.
I'm not necessarily talking about tomorrow. I'm talking about when the dust clears and that we can get back to regular life, what we should look into.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that company that you mentioned sounds great. I know, you know, Arena Stage does really great work, of course. So, you know, locally, I'm sure there is great work. I apologize, I don't know so much about Maryland as much.
Okay, thank you.
Only Theater does a nice job with their shows.
Only Theater.
I want to mention that Hazak, as soon as we can, we'll be going to the theater as we did last year and the year before, as often as we can. And one of the places we like to go in the local area is Theater J, which is at the DC JCC. It's a nice room. And also the programs have a Jewish theme. And so we will be doing that as soon as we can. I wanted to share one other thing, which anybody on the call, I would invite you to share. I want to share an experience that John and I had when we were very young. We had absolutely no money. We were in New York, and we went up to a Times Square And those days, it was right in the middle of Times Square, to see what kind of tickets they had available. And we went to a totally mesmerizing show of Carmen at the Lincoln Center. There were fires on the stage. The house was packed. I don't know how we got tickets, but we went. And it was life-changing for me, from the perspective of having seen lots of theater, but never having seen an opera or an operetta. And I fell in love with it. And those kinds of experiences happen. I don't know that they happen in DC, but they sure do happen in New York. So anybody else want to share a theater experience before we end the program?
I went, Sandy.
Yes.
I remember as a 10th grader, we went to New York for the Jewish community and went to Broadway. And my first show was Hello, Dolly with Pearl Bailey.
Good way to start.
Wow, what a absolute, I mean, I'll never forget doing that, seeing that.
Harvey, you had a comment?
It's peripheral, but yesterday Molly and I went to the National Gallery of Art to see the Degas show. It's Degas paintings backstage at the Paris Opera, and you see rehearsals, you see the stage manager type people working, and what was the revelation for me was learning about what they called the subscribers. These are akin to stage door Johnnies, but they're rich men who subscribe to the opera, and in return they actually get inside. They're not waiting at the door. They're in what is literally called the green room, and they're able to hit on all the young ballerinas. It's a beautiful show, and it's quite safe going there. You get a time. So I'd recommend it.
You have to get tickets in advance.
You do, and you do it online. They're free, of course. And we even found parking just 1 block away for under $9 for the afternoon.
Let me just do this.
I have something to recommend. The other night I saw something from the Stryker Center. It was a play called Righteous, and it was about a righteous Christian and the Holocaust. And I thought, oh, you know, it's not going to be so wonderful, but it was riveting. And if you look up Temple Emmanuel, the Stryker Center, you can see this also. I highly recommend it. It was terrific. There were about 7 actors, and from different places, obviously, all on Zoom. It was wonderful.
We'll let this pass. Okay. Dora, it looks like you've got your hand up.
So, not exactly. Not exactly theater, but anyway. On Sunday, it's chamber music.
I think we're giving
the young company.
Instruments.
I think someone has 2 things going at the same time. That's when this thing happens. You can't have your computer or your iPad and your phone on at the same time, or it creates this kind of noise. I've been through it quite a bit. Anyway, there is a young group that has just started to create chamber music in DC, and they put themselves together, and it was just before the corona struck. So they have now managed to do it online, and it's on Sundays, and I'm going to send link to Sandy, who can then send it to all of us. It's a wonderful young group, and they had they have the most unusual concerts. One of them recently was young people, mostly in New York, who are involved, New York University, they're involved in creating works for percussion instruments. Now, I think percussion instruments, you think it's gonna be drums, but that's only one thing. It's all kinds of materials, and people are actually writing music. So it was wonderful. And then another one was an accordionist and a vocalist from Serbia, which was pretty incredible, actually. So different things that they've been putting together, and I think it's really worthwhile. It's on Sundays at 4 o'clock, not every Sunday, of course, and I will send you a link.
Okay, I'll send it to everybody. Joel.
Speaking about the Music Man, the first show I ever saw was at the National Theater, and it was the Music Man. And I don't remember if it starred Robert Preston or Forrest Tucker. It was one of those two, but it was the first one I ever saw.
Yeah, I saw that many shows when it used to be at where the tennis courts are now.
Carter Barron.
Carter Barron, do you all remember that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, they used to have great shows. They had great shows all summer long.
Yeah, they did.
I remember going there when I was in the, I think 5th or 6th grade, and saw Dick Clark's Cavalcade of Stars.
Yeah.
Wonderful shows.
Okay. I totally agree with you, Joel. It's a look back at my teenage years.
Yeah.
Look back at my teenage years. Anyone else have a comment? Yes, Natalie.
Okay, so a couple of comments. International theater, two comments. I have a friend who's a big theater buff, and she tells me, I have never costed this out, but she goes with her husband every year to London, and they go for 4 or 5 days, and they take in many shows. And she says that the difference in price between the London theater and the New York theater is enough that it pays for her trip.
Wow.
So, yeah. So that's something I would love to try one day. My own experience many years ago, well, not many, about 10 years ago, I was in Kiev. And of course, the state helps to sponsor their theaters. And it's world class in terms of ballet and opera and music. I don't know about drama, but we went every night, and we never paid more than about $8 to go to the ballet, which was pretty much the equivalent of the Bolshoi or the Mariinsky. And the same thing, every night, $6, $8. That was one of the best theater experiences I've ever had.
That's great. Anyone else have a comment? So I'll remind you all that not last summer, but the summer before, I went to the Edinburgh Festival, where it's called the Fringe Festival, but where you can also, Natalie, see shows for $5. And they're fabulous, and they're all over the city. Yeah. In every nook and cranny. John and I saw people playing musical instruments. We saw a Russian symphony group. We've seen ballet. We've seen just a mixed bag of all kinds of interesting art from all over the world. People are attracted to Edinburgh, and it's usually going on the last 2 weeks of August. And this year, I know that they had opportunity for people to see it online. So as we broaden our view from the district to New York to around the world, those of us who love art and enjoy the theater and all of its parts, including the music and the art, I'm personally attracted to the stage settings. I love how they look and the costumes that that they're there. I really think we all feel that same feeling in enjoying what's at the theater. So I want to take this opportunity to thank Noam so much for a very interesting presentation.
Great.
And to tell him when the theater opens up, we'd love to have you back to tell us what's going on and to give us some hints about some of the things you heard us ask about today. I also want to thank everybody for their indulgence on the technology challenges we had earlier this morning. We will let you know very clearly what to do for the beekeeper and his presentation on September 10th. I love that we've had so many people on this today enjoying Noam's presentation. And I want to again thank all of you for putting up with the technology. We'll see what happens next time. So thank you, Noam, very much.
Thanks so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sandy,
Yes,
You.
yes, Joel.
thank you
Oh,
for putting it together.
you're welcome. More to come this fall. We have tons of things to come. So we'll see you all soon. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay on Zoom if you can. Okay.
Left anyway.
Everybody's gone. So that was really good once he got started.